When I was writing my first novel, my Rapunzel retelling, I would feel a huge wave of anxiety every time I even thought about sitting down to write. Some days, each word felt like nails on a chalkboard, and 500 words felt like an unattainable goal. I was just so worried that what I was writing wasn't actually good. Spoiler alert, it wasn't good. The further I got into the book, the harder it got. And when I was in the middle of the book, which is really hard to write, I was feeling really discouraged. One morning, I was in the shower, washing my hair, and I started thinking about, not about actually sitting down to write, but about what I was going to write. And I started thinking about the scene, and while I was in the shower, I basically wrote the scene in my head, the dialogue and what was going to happen, and knew kind of the order of what was going to happen in the scene. Later that day, when I sat down to write, I was surprised to find that my anxiety was greatly lessened. And I jotted down quickly the kind of bullet points of what I had gone over in my head, and then filled it in to write the scene. And it was way easier than I was expecting it to be. That's when I realized that for me, knowing what is going to happen in advance or what I'm going to write next is really helpful, as opposed to having the creative license to just kind of wander how I want to go and let things just happen on page. Outlines, and especially detailed outlines, worked really well for me. Today I just wanted to discuss, is there such a thing as plotters and pantsers? This might seem like a really obvious answer, like of course there are, right? People tend to lean one way or the other because of personality or whatever, and it's biological, and there are a lot of plotters that do really well, and there are a lot of pantsers who do really well writing books and publishing them and things. And so of course both ways can work. You might just think, well, of course you're either naturally a plotter or a pantser, or at least lean more in one direction, because it's a spectrum, and so everybody's somewhere on the spectrum, right? But today have been thinking more about how much control we have over things like this. Do I have to write with outlines in order to write good books and make the writing process work for me, or could I find a way to pants my novels that works? Would that be beneficial to my writing? And the same could be said vice versa for pantsers. Could they learn to plot their books, and would it be beneficial? I do tend to believe that there is an inclination towards one or the other. In one of my psychology classes, we learned about nature versus nurture, and it's just the idea of, are people the way they are because they're born that way, nature, or are they the way they are because of the environment that they grew up in, which is nurture? And basically the answer that my teacher gave is that it is both. It's always both. It's just the percentage can differ depending on the situation. So sometimes it's a lot of nature and not very much nurture, or sometimes it's a lot of nurture and not very much nature. And you can see this debate in a lot of different areas, including like politics and writing. Are you a plotter or pantser? Things like that. And I just think it's a really interesting idea, because recently I have been leaning more and more towards the idea that nurture is a lot more powerful than nature, just because of some of the books that I've been reading and the discussions I've been having with my husband. So while I do believe that we do have an inclination towards one or the other, I don't actually believe that we are stuck in that it's not a thing that we are forced to do one way or the other. I think that what's most important is for us to try some different methods and find what works best for us and use that, and then if it stops working, then we can try methods again and see what works for us and things. But I also think it's really important to decide what kind of book you want to write, and then find methods that are going to support that type of book. So I always think of Stephen King. He is obviously a super hyper successful author who pantses, and he doesn't use outlines, and he thinks that outlines are restricting and can actually cause your book to not be as good. And what he does is he takes interesting characters and puts them in and makes you care about them, and then makes bad things happen to them and puts them in interesting situations. And I think it's interesting because a lot of the reviews that I've seen, and this could be different for different people, but a lot of the reviews that I've seen, they talk about how much they love his characters and how interested they are throughout the whole book, and how much they love his books. And the people who tend to not like his books as much, it's usually because the endings are a little bit of a letdown for them. And I would say that outlining is one of the things that can help with endings and making them really interesting and tie everything all together. But outlines can also, not always, but they can make your characters feel more cardboard or more less dimensional and things like that, and maybe make the characters in the plot throughout the novel not quite as interesting. And not always, but I would say that pantsing, if you can, if you're good at coming up with characters that people like, then pantsing and seeing where they go can make it give it a more organic feel to it. And so then I look at, you know, versus like Brandon Sanderson, who always has amazing endings, and he is very much a plotter. He has very detailed outlines for his books, and then he mostly pantses. I think he lets his characters be more creative, where he doesn't know the characters until he starts writing, but then he has his plot really detailed so that he knows what he's working up to, and as he's writing he can change his outline because he knows the ending, and so he can kind of tie it all together in really amazing ways. So I just think it's kind of interesting to see the different strengths and weaknesses of outlining versus not, and the different ways that authors kind of combine the two. You know, like Brandon Sanderson, he's a very detailed outliner, but then he also has areas where he gives himself the creative license to explore so that his books do not feel too, you know, oh, it's just the next thing after the next thing, you know, too cardboard cut out kind of thing. So this is going to be just kind of a short video with my thoughts, but that's kind of what I've been thinking about recently with plotters versus pantsers. And I really think because I think that we have a lot of control over what we do, I think that you could find a way to make plotting or pantsing work for you, even if that's not your natural inclination. If you are a pantser, I think that you could find ways to outline or use outlines without taking away from your creative process and making writing feel like too much of a chore. And if you are a plotter, I do think that you could use the pantsing method in ways that would not be too stressful and still allow you to actually finish a book. And maybe the best thing to do would be to learn about both methods and then find ways to utilize both in your writing so that you can find strengths from both. For me, I'm naturally a plotter. I could find ways to do free writing and some different things that could strengthen my writing, even if it was just things like before I write, I free write my characters to get to know them, so then when I put them in my outline, they don't feel too cardboard cut out. Or if you're a pantser, you could do something like have the ending in mind, or you could basically draft while you're outlining, like have actual dialogue and scenes in the outline as they come to you while you're outlining, so that you don't lose that creative energy that is pushing you forward. And I don't know exactly, you know, everyone's methods are so different, and different things work for different people, and sometimes different things work for the same person with a different book. And so it's definitely something that you have to try and just see what works best for you. But I definitely think that there are strengths to both. And even if you are an extreme plotter or an extreme pantser, I think that you can learn to use the strengths of the opposite to make your writing better, and that we don't need to feel trapped by the term plotter or pantser, because we have a lot of control over our writing methods. And I genuinely, I don't really know what I'm saying anymore, so I'm just going to wrap up the video, but I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear too if you have ever felt kind of trapped by your identity as a plotter or as a pantser in getting to where you want to be with writing. So if you like this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe for lots of reading and writing content. If you want to follow my reading journey, I do post a review on Goodreads for every book that I read, and I also post my favorite books on Instagram, as well as more about my writing journey there. Those will both be in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you in the next one.